If you've already made a New Year's resolution, I'm sorry, but we need to talk. Doing it the old way, mustering all the willpower you can, crossing your fingers and leaping into a better future, usually lands people right where they didn't want to be, back with the other well-intentioned majority who quietly give up by February. Let's do this differently. Before we decide what to change, let's clarify who we are and why it matters. And maybe, just maybe, we make February the new January 1st. Come on, let's grow and change together. Dr. Dave here, aka the Garden Shrink. I'm an old psychologist with fresh insights into life, love, and gardening. Join me on a journey to increase both our fruit in the garden and in our professional lives. Whether you're just thinking about gardening as a hobby, or you're an old pro, or just someone interested in psychological advice minus the copay, I've got something for you. So come on, let's grow together. So before we talk about habits, strategies, or resolutions, we need to slow down and assess. Because here's the problem. Most resolutions aren't really goals. They're fads with a deadline. Well-intentioned, vague improvements without real buy-in. And that's not a character flaw. It's a design problem. Most of us were taught that change works like this. Try harder, want it more, and just don't quit. But change is hard, and willpower-based change doesn't hold up very well under stress, fatigue, or real-life demands. Motivation and enthusiasm are great assets. They're necessary, but they're not sufficient because emotions come and go. And when life gets busy or hard and enthusiasm wanes, and it will, we don't suddenly become weak-willed, we simply revert to what's familiar. That's why real change can't be built on emotion alone. It has to be anchored in something deeper. Real change, the kind that actually lasts, needs a compelling why. Not a New Year's why, not a guilt-driven why, but a reason that resonates with who you are and what you truly believe. Because when your why is shallow, change feels heavy. It feels burdensome. But when your why is meaningful, when you're doing it for you or someone or something bigger than yourself, change feels worth it, even when it's hard. Here's a Dr. Dave truth I've learned over years of doing this work. Change sticks when it's connected to who you want to be, not just what you think you should do. And yes, I'm still learning this. In psychology, it shows up in something called self-concordance theory, which is just a fancy way of saying we stick with change when it lines up with our values and our identity, our core, and not from external pressures or feelings of guilt. It also fits with self-determination theory, which tells us we're more likely to sustain change when it supports autonomy, competence, and connection. In plain English, when change feels chosen, doable, and meaningful, it lasts longer. That's why assessment comes first. Not to criticize yourself, not to relive regrets, but to understand honestly and kindly what last year was really like for you. Assessment is also about remembering who you are beneath the shoulds, remembering what matters to you, and remembering who you once dreamed of becoming before life got so busy. Somewhere along the way, many of us stopped dreaming and started managing. Life becomes a series of duties, checklists, and have-tos. And we look in the mirror and hardly recognize ourselves anymore. That's why we need to stop, reflect, remember, and recalibrate. So before you decide what to change, it's worth asking a different kind of question. If there were fewer limitations, less pressure, less noise, who would you want to be this year? Not who you think you should be, but who you actually want to grow into. You know, it's kind of funny, we actually learned how to do this change thing back in high school, remember? It's called the scientific method. Before you change anything, before you run the experiment, you assess what's already happening. Somewhere along the way, we just stopped applying that to our own lives. And this isn't just a psychology thing. It's exactly how good gardeners think, too. As Farmer Dave might say, with gardening, it's the same idea, only different. You can't just throw some seed down willy-nilly and expect growth. You've got to know what your plants actually need. You have to assess what makes them tick. For example, seeds need to be planted at the right depth. Garlic, at least 2 inches deep. Lettuce, only about a 1/4 inch. You want strong roots before strong shoots. Mix those up and next year you won't be eating much garlic or salad, which would make Farmer Dave very sad indeed. Gardening takes planning, which we'll talk about in the next video, but it also takes looking back, examining what worked and what didn't last season. If Farmer Dave's cucumbers didn't produce like he hoped, he doesn't yell at the seeds. He has to figure out why. Was it the soil, not enough sunlight, a pest problem made worse by planting in the same spot year after year? Either way, you've got to pivot. You diagnose the real problem and adjust accordingly. That's smart gardening. And you know what else is smart? Keeping a garden journal so you can track what worked and learn from what didn't. Because failures in the garden aren't failures at all. They're compost. And compost creates rich soil where plants and gardeners can grow and thrive. So what Farmer Dave is really pointing to, and what psychology has been saying for a long time, is this. You don't grow by guessing. You grow by tuning in, by paying attention. Before you rush into changing anything, here are 3 simple questions worth asking. What actually worked for me last year and what didn't, even though I kept trying? And what was going on in my life that affected what worked or didn't? And have I been living true to my values? Those questions aren't about judgment, they're about clarity. To make this easier, I've put together a 1-page reflection worksheet you can use before making any resolutions. It walks you through looking back at last year, checking your motivation, ability, and follow-through, and reconnecting with who you want to become, not just what you want to fix. You can find it in the resources section at gardenshrink.com. It's free, it's simple, and it's meant to be used gently, not perfectly. If you watched my earlier video on grit and Angela Duckworth's work, this will sound familiar. Grit is an intensity. It's continuity. And continuity requires design, not just determination. In the next video, we'll be talking about planning, but not willpower-heavy, perfect-on-paper planning. We'll be talking about how to design change that actually fits your life, your energy, your schedule, and your season. A design that allows margin, not rigid rules. And after that, we'll talk about tending. Because in gardens and in life, missed days don't mean you failed, they mean you're human. And it's time to adjust. It's time to pivot. So don't rush into a resolution just yet. Motivation is great at the starting line, but it doesn't always get us over the finish line. So take some time to assess, to reflect, and to reconnect with what really matters. And when you're ready, come on, let's grow together.